already scraping the bottom of the barrel.
As Hollywood continues to be bereft of new ideas, it continues to cast its eyes back to the 80s, looking for anything it could develop into a movie. They've went to this well so many times, they're starting to really scrape the bottom of the barrel. And with that, we come to this week's new release, The Fall Guy. Now, the original Fall Guy was a TV show that was on for 5 years in the early 80s, starring Lee Majors and Heather Thomas. They were stuntmen who moonlit as bounty hunters. Now, the show was okay. It wasn't a big success. It ran for 5 seasons, 113 episodes. Never once landed inside the yearly top 10. I vaguely remember the show. I watched it a little bit when I was younger. It was pretty decent, but really nothing overly memorable, other than a catchy theme song. If you haven't heard it, Google it. You'll probably like it. So I was pretty surprised when I found out late last year that they were developing this into a movie. But the trailer looked pretty interesting, and I'm a pretty big fan of Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. So I figured, let's give this a shot. So what do we have here? Is this an interesting take on an otherwise obscure television show? Or is it yet another soulless reimagined reboot of an old IP that's destined to flop? Well, before we answer that, let's talk a little bit about the plot to the movie The Fall Guy.
Let's talk.
So here we find Colt Seaver. He is the best stuntman in the business. He is dating fellow movie maker Jody Marino. Now, while working with her on a film, he has a terrible accident, and because of this, he withdraws from the movie business, leaving his job and his girlfriend Jody behind to live in obscurity. 1 year later, however, he is called back by his friend Dan Tucker to come work on a new film. Dan tells him Jody asked for him directly, which was a lie, but it was how he was going to get his buddy back into the business. So, due to the guilt he has for leaving her without an explanation, he springs back into action when the star of the big studio movie suddenly disappears. As the mystery surrounding the missing actor deepens, Colt soon finds himself ensnared in a sinister plot to push him to the edge of a fall more dangerous than any stunt he's ever performed. So let's begin with what works in this film. Now, you would assume a film about stuntmen would be filled with great stunts. And yes, you would be correct. There are several excellent practical effects and stunts done by real stuntmen and women, many of which are absolutely incredible. Whether it's explosions, car flips, car chases, fight scenes, it's really nice to see old school stunt people putting in the work to create wonderful practical effects. Also, kudos to the cast. Ryan Gosling, he plays Colt Seavers. Emily Blunt plays Jody, his love interest, and the producer of the film. And you can tell that both of them are having a great time here, really playing off each other well. The scene where they finally see each other after the year where he left, and she very publicly calls him out and puts him through the ringer, it could be cringy if it wasn't so endearing because of the chemistry between the two performers. They just have a fantastic screen presence. Especially Gosling coming off his hysterical performance as Ken last year. He really steals the show with his combination of charisma, charm, and presence, being both funny and a badass. The rest of your cast does a great job as well. Aaron Taylor Johnson, Winston Duke, they all put in great performances. And if you see this in the theaters, definitely stick around for the mid-credit scene where you get a cameo by the original cast of Lee Majors and Heather Thomas.
That works so well.
Now, what doesn't work in this film is, well, while the stunts are all excellent, some of them go on just a little bit longer than they should. There's a really good car chase scene towards the end of the film. It just feels like it just goes on and on. Maybe cutting a few minutes off of it would have, just made the film a little bit more lean. In fact, most of your great stunts feel like they just go on a little bit too long. I feel like they would have carried more impact if they would have just been a few minutes shorter each. And speaking of shorter, this movie is over 2 hours and 10 minutes long. And you feel it, especially in the middle. It just kind of grinds to a halt for about 15-20 minutes. I completely zoned out a couple times, and I had to remind myself to keep watching. Somebody should have taken about 15-20 minutes off of this film. You wouldn't have lost anything, and it would have made it a much more leaner and more entertaining experience. And I don't know if I would classify this as a negative or a positive, but this is a kind of a throwback 90s action / comedy / love story action movie. So it's not exactly your most original plot or premise. And there are times when it gets a little bit outlandish. But, that's kind of to be expected in a movie like this, so I won't fault it too hard. So The Fall Guy is a silly movie that exists solely to entertain the audience and call attention to the eye-popping stunts that happen throughout the film. It's an exciting movie-going experience providing jaw-dropping action, incredibly lovable leads, a great soundtrack, and ridiculous, chaotic fun. It's the perfect popcorn movie. Now, sadly, it seems like this movie is struggling at the box office. It did not do too well in its first weekend. And it has a budget of over $150 million, which means it needs to make a lot of money. And that's unfortunate, because these kind of easy-to-watch summer blockbusters should make money. Critics seem to like it. The people who have seen it seem to like it. So maybe word of mouth will carry the day and turn it into a success. And you know what? I hope it does. Yeah, it's based off of a pretty obscure 80s television show, but it's a really heartfelt and fun movie. I would recommend seeing it on a big screen, just so you can appreciate the stunts, and definitely stay around for the credits where they go behind the scenes, where you can see all the actual stunt people working to create the amazing spectacle that you see on the screen. This movie is a bit of a love letter to all the unknown stuntmen and stuntwomen. Plus, it has a cover of the original catchy theme song during this part, which is really kind of the cherry on top of the sundae. Well, that's it for me this week. Tune in next week where I give you my thoughts and feelings on whatever I've seen. So click that like button, subscribe, leave a comment, share this video with friends and enemies alike. And as always, thank you for giving me your valuable time, and I'll see you next week. Take care.